Howdy, what do you know, it is Rabbit of ScrubLeet Academy, and today we're going to be talking about my favorite subclasses in BG3. Truth be told, I haven't done a whole lot with BG3 since my last video on the subject, other than grab a ton of add-ons and test out a bunch of new classes and subclasses. I'm definitely going to have to work something out about my favorites there, but that's not what this video is about. This video is about my favorite subclasses from the base game for each class and why I love them so much. In light of the news that we'll be getting a new subclass for each of the 12 classes in the game, I figured this is the right time to discuss this. I intentionally made this a top 12 list because otherwise I'd probably have the top spots filled by only a couple of my favorite classes, and I want to shine some love on each one's standout. Remember, this list is not my opinion. Everything here is a complete fact, so if you disagree, you're wrong as usual. Let's get started. This one's an easy win for me. Hands down, this goes to the Wildheart Barbarian. The wealth of build options and the fact that it doubles down on the thing Barbarian does right, raging, makes this the superior spec in my opinion. As overpowered as Bearheart is, and I've played the hell out of it, what makes this spec so cool is the buffing potential it has for your party. Barbarian is not a class I regularly see as the buff guy, but Wildheart lets it play that role in a way that doesn't feel out of place. I love a spec that gives more moves to a class, has goofy abilities that work when you want them to, like Aspect of the Cheetah, and overcomes the very many sticks that D&D throws at you with their landstride abilities. These abilities all feel like one giant carrot put together, augmenting the class's innate simplicity with a level of depth that will rival that of your mom's butt. But why not Berserker or Wild Magic? Well, Berserker has the detriment of just being milquetoast white, boring as piss, and doing roar barbarian crap that kind of leaves the class in one dimension. My opinion on Wild Magic is even simpler. When I press button, I want thing. I don't want randomness in my randomness game, though I'll admit that some of the effects are cool. Funny though, the thing I like about Wild Magic is the most deterministic of its perks. That you can restore ally spell slots, which pairs Barbie so well with Pally, it's actually kinda silly. Still, Wildheart crushes this category. Bard was pretty tough to decide, but I'm gonna go with the College of Lore on this one. Why? I mean, the College of Valor and Swords both get extra attack, which highly improves the action economy, but the versatility of Lore absolutely blows both of them out of the water. Sorry, but the spell list access is just really insane, and when choosing a college, I always ask myself, why do I even want to play a Bard? The answer then becomes staggeringly more simple, because I want the one class that can do it all. College of Lore won't cause the most damage, not even close, but it does so much support it more than makes up for things. The College of Lore is to modern day colleges what a celebrity is to the cast of Here Comes Honey Boo Boo. Even though it's technically true, and they make a hell of a lot more money than I do, we can all admit that not all hot tubs are jacuzzis, can't we? Lore actually gives you the components needed to succeed in your field. It drops 3 more skills worth of proficiency, making the player character the only one who actually needs to perform skills, which is perfect since there are so many speech-oriented skill checks you might want to pass for various reasons: experience, preparation, lore, and you'll never need another class for any of them. Moreover, the game automatically defaults to pushing you into the speech challenges yourself. Your character becomes the guy who has to do them. So, it just kind of fits. It's like a glove. The build diversity you have means that while you'll usually design your bard around your party, rather than designing your bard first, you can fill any role that you're missing, specializing roles rather than generalizing, but still having the ability to play around a fallen ally is by far the best thing about Bard. And I'll admit, Swords gives it a run and definitely wins for DPS when combined with Pally, but it can't compete with the raw utility. Most of BG3 is about utility. Leave the DPS to the other 3 characters while you CC and heal like a literal god. Oh, right, did I mention Lore does the best in crowd control? Never underestimate the power of turning a strong foe into a punching bag. I spent an inordinate amount of time playing around with each of the Cleric specs, trying to find the best, but it wasn't really to find the best. It was in surprisingly trying to find ways that one of the other 5 could beat the Life or the Tempest domain. In the end, I'm going Tempest. Not to slight Life, which absolutely rules, I should know, I am it. But the Life domain doesn't bring the bacon home when it comes to support damage. Tempest has all the Cleric healing goodies, some CC, but what it has in spades is the most powerful element of damage in BG3. Lightning, the power of Thor in the palm of my fucking hand. Let me just throw this little bottle of water at you and Oh, you're fucked now, buddy. I know how to conjure puddles, you little bitch, and according to the transitive properties of math and English, puddle plus lightning equals murder. Tempest dominates with incredible lightning spells that the cleric simply cannot get anywhere else naturally, so it covers a niche that lets you blaze through cleric levels and fight like a wizard. The absurd thing is, while life gives heavy armor proficiency, Tempest gives both the armor and martial weapon proficiencies. This can be your tank, your DPS, your healer, CC, and utility all at once. Pretty much the only area it lacks is in skill versatility, but you'll really only need intimidation from them anyway, since clerics get thaumaturgy, adding advantage to intimidation checks. Shout out to Light Domain, but it's just not nearly as powerful. It is cool for CC, but his effects are pretty much nullified by the all-popular, stupid broken radiating orb strategy that turns clerics into a frontline control bot even more than they already were. Trickery, knowledge, and nature all give various bonuses, but the trade-offs are just too severe, and War Domain is good in theory but doesn't function extremely well with multi-classing, especially with extra attack, and doesn't provide much uniqueness to Cleric. I still like War, but I can see a lot of faults in it. Nah, this one's gotta go to Tempest. Druid's real tough, not because of how close the competition is, but because of how terrible I find Druid to be. Just like going for a walk in the sunlight, something I haven't done in 7 years, Druid is notoriously cobbled together as an inferior version of every single other class way too often, and hyped up like it's the greatest thing since my uncle finally overcoming his addiction to online poker. He sucked before he quit, he only quit when he ran out of money, and he's still kinda the same asshole without an addiction to online poker. Honestly, this class feels like I never have any impact if I bring it along, and I've played Druid for a while to come to that decision. I've settled on Circle of Spores as the obvious best in the class, but that's not my favorite whenever I choose to play Druid. No, I actually prefer what might be someone else's least favorite, and that is the Circle of the Moon. I understand that the animal forms generally underperform, well, except for that one time. But I can't help it, I love the simplicity that takes advantage of a complex gameplay style in animal shapeshifting. You pretty much have to understand how to get the most out of shapeshifting or it's just a substandard gameplay design, but there are ways to manipulate enemies with each spec and set up conditions so that you're not just knocked out of animal form every single turn because the AI targets the crappiest member of your party, which too often happens to be your shapeshifted low AC animal. Lunar Mend is a nice touch that feels like I always have an option to maintain my form. Not powerful, but kinda cool if you don't really have a way to reach somebody. The Circle of the Land is relatively similar in ways, but I find you pretty much need a guidebook to get through all the various spells that you could potentially pick up with one or another path, and it's actually kind of an analysis paralysis build when I really sit down to play it. I'm not a fan of those since my decision-making skills aren't the most refined. I will say that the Circles of the Land and Moon have a fatal flaw though, and that's equivalent to the thing I like about Moon. They synergize with the shapeshifting, which is absurdly bad in conversation or while attempting to navigate areas effectively. The limited options for each form aren't a draw either, but being able to transform on the fly is a fun element to an otherwise dumb class. Spores is powerful, sure, but it just kind of feels like a weaker caster than the ones I'd rather go ahead and play. I'm going Moon on this one. Fighter's another utterly easy decision with not a lot to talk about, and one that almost certainly won't be controversial to anyone. This one, Battle Master handily wins. It's got enough tactics to make the class feel complete and powerful with some logical utility that covers a lot of bases. The scaling of these abilities isn't the most balanced in either extreme, but it's fantastic to have so many neat attacks added to an otherwise bare-bones class. Disarm, Rally, Riposte, and Menacing Attack are easily the standouts for me, but Push and Trip are cool additions, and Evading Footwork and Goad are interesting for the right builds. This spec just lets you play around so much with the type of fighter you want to be. By contrast, Champion's boring as a stale piss that won't fuck off and let you get on with your day, while Eldritch Knight is just too weak. It gets so many spells, standouts being Shield, Misty Step, Enlarge Reduce, and a ton of the utility ritual spells. That said, I'ma bring a caster that isn't so limited, and the losses easily outweigh the gains. This kind of utility outside of Shield can be covered by so many other classes that don't lose as much as Fighter does by taking them. Itemization, too, isn't extra great for EK to make up for it. Battlemaster's just too awesome to pass up. Alright, we know what dominates here. Way of the open hand. One word, flurry of blows. Let's be real and just give it to the hand. Easily my favorite, and that's not just for the insane Tavern Brawler DPS you can glean with this thing. I love the utility. Where Fighter's one of the simplest classes in the game, Monk is one of the more complicated. This keeps things at that nice level of balance where you don't have 100 potential decisions to make, but you're not stuck basic attacking 3 times because it's the best option either. Key Resonation is such a cool move though, and I just love the versatility of a free Sanctuary after popping an Angelic Slumber Pot. Situational, but you can get right in there and nobody can do a goddamned thing about it. Special shoutouts to the Way of Shadow, because who doesn't want to be a ninja? The darkness theme is just so fucking cool. Honestly, the only spec I never really resonated with was the Way of the Four Elements, just because it adds far too many moving parts to an already bloated class. It's just a bit overbuilt, if that makes any sense. Way of the Open Hand is extremely fun, extremely broken, and extremely handy to have in a fight. Paladin technically has 4 specs, but we'll get rid of Oathbreaker for this list right off the bat since its implementation is extremely limiting and overcoming it just kinda pisses me off a little too much to even consider it. The 1k gold, I know, isn't a big hurdle when you just pack a tune's inventory and then sell it right back to the dumb fucker like they don't recognize what you just did, but if you play more legitimately like I do, it's a real waste of time and resources to just keep respecking. Starting this one off strong, I know, but we're on to the 2 specs now that dominate this one. Oath of the Ancients has some remarkably cool effects, not the least of which is a resistance to spell damage aura, and a playstyle that synergizes with itself by allowing you to ensnare and then gain advantage against ensnared targets, but it's just a bit unwieldy. Personally, I go for the Oath of Vengeance, not just because it's easily the strongest for damage and boasts incredible support with haste and hold person, but because breaking your Oath as a Vengeance Paladin is actually surprisingly difficult to accidentally do, unlike the other main oaths. Don't get me wrong, I love the Oath of the Ancients as my mainline healer in a full party of melees, but the game system itself in BG3 doesn't handle that all that well. I'm much more in favor of removing a stick than adding a carrot, and Vengeance has the fewest sticks while letting me smite losers with fucking impunity. Oath of Devotion, in my opinion, is just too weak and offers very little special utility that Paladins just can't get otherwise, and Oathbreaker is cumbersome, as I said, and relatively poorly put together for all the obstruction you go through just to have it around. Its Aura of Hate doesn't play well with others, which is the main draw to have it, while Devotion's Aura is the worst of all of them for raw usefulness and impact. Ranger is another case where the obviously best spec is pretty much always Gloomstalker, but it's not my favorite. I've always been partial to the Lone Wolf, which is pretty much how I envision a proper Ranger to be. I find huge encumbrances offered by pet builds, while the sniper build seems to be offered only by the hunter. I have a massive love of the hunter archetype as one of my top 5 favorite specs in the entire game, and weirdly, in many games, including World of Warcraft. I love its narrow options for choices that let you play variations of the same build. I love that it can swap between melee and range fluidly and gets access to either playstyle. I fucking love volley as an attack. The problem is, it shoehorns you as much as it gives you options. Lightning Arrow from base Ranger would be amazing with these guys, but it's a terrible spell in BG3 because it doesn't scale very well. Colossus Slayer doesn't work with both hand crossbows, lowering its DPS initially compared to Gloomy, and when the stupid fucking pet works, it's just higher power with little to make it weak compared to Druid shapeshifting. Honestly, Hunter is demonstrably the worst and weakest of the 3 specs when it comes to impact, but I can't help choosing Hunter every goddamn time. Why is that? Well, despite Gloomy being a stronger specs in terms of the hunting hunter trope, it does the same thing every encounter. Sneak, strike fast and hard, use Dread Ambush or hide, then just attack until the thing is dead. The gameplay loop doesn't change much. Contrarily, Beastmaster pets are pets, and pets are the ogre's fucking pits when it comes to getting through doors, disappearing when you need them, and generally getting in the way when you're trying to loot garbage on the ground. Plus, it slows down the game more to have another attack you have to keep track of every single turn. Hunter is fast and can play around mobs to a certain extent. Plus, you don't always feel like you really have decisions set in stone that you make every time. You're a finisher. Find the weakest target and drop righteous fucking thunder down on them like Thoradin, the almighty god of Thunder Paladins. It easily dominates as the most tactical ranger, which suits me like the finest of gloves. This one might be easy for you, but it's a different path for me. This might well be my favorite spec in the whole of BG3, and no, I'm not going to troll you with Arcane Trickster. Let's just throw that piece of fucking shit in the trash bin where it belongs. Surprisingly though, it's also not Thief. Assassin, the glorious. This spec absolutely performs to a level that Gloomstalker fails to live up to. I love the Sneak Thief, but it needs to want to sneak around and get that first strike. That is, it needs to want to strike and not be found, but if someone does find it, it also needs to be able to shut that shit down right away. Assassin's Alacrity does just that, restoring your action and bonus action, and letting you drop that fucker who thinks he's a tough-as-nails bitch with Assassin Initiative. Combined with Assassinate Ambush, which comes as a direct result of your opening attack to start combat in the first place, an Assassin just plays like a dream. And all of this is near immediate low-hanging fruit that welcomes you inside of the spec and sits you down for a hot cup of cocoa while it gently fondles your balls. That's how I describe this spec. It's the ball fondler spec. Its whole job is to please, and I hope you enjoy that because that's all the spec has to offer. It might be a closer competition if Thief actually had any thematic abilities to make it cool, but outside of second story work, a trope but not really emblematic of rogues in general, it's just a bonus action that requires other specs to really take advantage of it. By contrast, Thief is a lamer spec than Champion from the fighter, and Arcane Trickster is an impotent version of Eldritch Knight. Assassin literally saves the rogue class from being the worst class in the game in terms of subclasses, but it does so much work carrying this stable. I hope the new subclass takes on some of that burden because the Assassin's back has gotta be hurting by now. And I like to add to the end of this, I understand that I just criticized Gloomstalker for playing the exact same all the way through, but Gloomy does not take advantage of that archetype to the extent that Assassin does. So if you do something different, I like it. If you do something the best it could possibly be done, I like it. If you just do something, you're not really standing out to me. Sorcerer is a bit of a tough one as well, since I had to divorce the Sorcerer's base capabilities from their specializations. Not that any of Sorcerer's specializations are incredibly bad, in fact I like all of them, and I will give honorable mention to Wild Magic here since it's far more robust than the Barbarian's similar specialization, but it's still random, so I can only love it as a meme. Still, Sorcerer has some solid options for subclasses. I finally settled on Draconic Bloodline though, mostly out of personal preference. If you prefer Storm Sorcery, I can't fault you, it is the superior subclass of the two, but I'm a defensive, cautious player, and Draconic is far stronger for defensive work. It basically carries you through the start of the game and doesn't let up later. Further, you can really take advantage of overlapping those hit points by being a Gold Dwarf DB Sorc with the Toughness feat for an absurd amount of health for a Sorc. Both specs still get Flight, though Storm's is immediate and conditional, where DB's is much later but free. Still, by the time you get DB's Flight, you'll probably have had access to the Fly spell for a long time, so it's just a matter of respecking another spell in the late game. No, it's the immediate benefit and the elemental affinity damage that really stick out for me in this spec. Humorously, with the insane versatility of Sorcerer already, that's all I really needed, is just a bit more defense to make me both the immovable object and the unstoppable fireball. Draconic Bloodline is my choice here. Warlock is strange. I know it seems like it should be, but even the specializations are a little weird. You could argue that any of the subclasses is great in its own right, but honestly I always preferred the theme of the Great Old One. First, it's the only one that you could try to spend all day explaining the lore of, only to end up exactly where you started. It's an eldritch being, a truly eldritch being, something nigh incomprehensible like a Lovecraftian monstrosity beyond the reach of time or space. And the abilities of the Great Old One reflect the theme of complete unknownness. It's all about psychic damage, avoiding psychic damage, and cursing and slowing opponents. Huge debuffs which add a rather unique playstyle that is pretty self-contained. And I can't say the domination spells later on aren't a huge theme for the Great Old One, but my favorite ability is gained instantly. Mortal Reminder, which just spreads fear every time you crit someone. It's designed to break minds, this spec. Nothing else, even a Fiend's Fireball, can compare to the theme for me. Arcfey is kinda cool and fits the Fey theme, but Fey has just never been my style. The Great Old One all the way for me. Finally, we've arrived, and this was the most difficult one to decide, not just because it had the most subclasses of any class, but because I actually really like so many of them enough that I wasn't sure which one I preferred. The fact that you can enchant 2 targets at once with enchantment spells is broken awesome and feeds the control element. The power and morbid dominance of necromancy plus the ability to spawn 2 corpses feeds the undead theme. Arcane Ward's party utility is incredibly handy to have around, but all of them eventually fell to the best wizard subclass in the game, the Divination School. I actually didn't plan around this one. It surprised me as much as it might surprise you, considering divination spells are usually pretty boring and rarely is there more than 1 or 2 that you'd ever want to fucking cast. They're lame, none of them impact combat, and they really slow the tabletop game down. Also, look at this pathetic spell list. There's basically nothing here. You'll never take advantage of the stupid Divination Savant perk. The thing is, that's not what's cool about the school. Divination is awesome for 2 reasons, and both have to do with the portent dice. The first one consists of the dice themselves. They're phenomenally well done in BG3, allowing you to apply high rolls to your own effects and low rolls to your enemies, causing them to fail or miss a lot of crucial stuff. Second on the list are the prophecies you gain from Expert Divination. They let you effectively fulfill mini-quests to refill spent portent dice on a long rest. Honestly, it's probably the most unique thing the Divination School has ever seen in any iteration of D&D, because you can't make this school fun to play. It's just dull, but the subclass named after it is a competitor for the best subclass in all of BG3. Well, that's my list. Do you agree? What's your favorite spec? And more importantly, can your favorite spec kick my favorite spec's ass in a fight? Let me know in the comments section. It's time for you to shine, and while you're at it, prove me wrong by clicking all the bullshit that's about to come up on your screen. Yeah, that'll show me. I really shouldn't have tested you, should I have? Finally, sub up to this channel where I do a bunch of crap. Video gameplay, theorizing, pretty much whatever I feel like, as a matter of fact. That being said, I'm gonna get up out of here. You take care, though, and bye-bye for now.